In distant Asia Minor a city shone whose name was Troy. The wealth and splendor of this metropolis eclipsed all neighboring cities. It also had magnificent walls. Built by the gods, this kingdom developed rapidly. Some people said that the city would become more developed than the legendary Atlantis, but the spinning goddesses of fate knew that the only similarity between Troy and Atlantis was their sad fate. In Troy reigned Priam alongside his wife Hecuba. He had already had his firstborn son Hector, and the queen was pregnant again the night before the baby was born. The queen had a terrible nightmare. In this dream the city of Troy was burning in flames. The king visited the oracle to try to understand the meaning of the dream. The answer given by the oracle was desperate. It was said that the birth of the second child would ruin Troy. On that same day Hecuba gave birth to the child. He was a strong and healthy baby boy, but Priam just wanted to avoid that terrible prophecy. The baby had to be sacrificed to safeguard his kingdom. Hecuba tried to protect her son, whom she had named Alexander, but could do nothing in the face of the king's will. The baby was handed over to the shepherd Achilles, who was given the mission to kill the baby. The shepherd took the baby to a forest at the foot of Mount Ida, but when he arrived there he didn't have enough courage to carry out the task. He put the baby on the ground and abandoned him to his fate. After several days, the shepherd still had the image of the baby. In his mind he decided to return to the place where he had abandoned him. Incredibly, the baby was in good health, suckled by a she-bear. The shepherd realized that the life of the little prince of Troy would not end prematurely, for this was the will of the gods. Achilles took the child and raised him as his son. The baby was named Paris, and grew up along with Aang's other sons. Paris became a man of impressive beauty, also having great physical strength. Like his adoptive father, he became a shepherd. He had a bucolic life in the countryside. His was the beautiful nymph Boon, who swore him eternal love. His life did not seem fit for the prophesied destiny, but he did not know that he was about to make a choice that would affect everyone around him. Music. Young Paris, while tending his flock, noticed that one of his young rams was straying away from the others, heading for a cave. He went to the cave to search for the lost ram, but inside the cave Paris found something unbelievable. There were 3 women with divine beauty. The shepherd did not doubt that they could only be goddesses. The young man did not know that he was about to make a decision that would change the fate of the world. Music. Forever earlier that same day, the Nereid Thetis married the hero Peleus. All the deities were invited to the marriage. The gods satisfied themselves at a great and lively banquet, but one goddess was not invited. Is the goddess of discord. She was furious and destined to take revenge, sitting at the banquet table. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and Hera, the queen of the gods, were chatting amiably. The goddess of discord flew over the banquet table and dropped a beautiful golden apple between the goddesses. On the beautiful bud was the inscription, to the most beautiful. This apple would become known as the apple of discord. The 3 goddesses fought over the apple. After all, each considered herself the most beautiful among the goddesses. With his powerful roar, Zeus stopped the goddesses' dispute. He said that attitude was not worthy of such important divinities. Zeus thought of a way to solve the standoff. He chose an impartial judge to elect the most beautiful of the goddesses. The apple of discord was given to Hermes, who would lead the goddesses to the judge of all the men in the world. The young shepherd Paris was chosen to settle the dispute. He was not the wisest, nor was he a great connoisseur of the concept of justice, but the Moirai, the women of destiny, had woven this future for him. After learning of his task, the goddesses were introduced to the shepherd. I am Hera, the wife of Zeus. Choose me as the most beautiful, and I will make you the richest king in all Asia, give you a palace as splendid as Olympus. I am Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom. Choose me, and you will be the greatest general ever. Instead of commanding herds, you will lead armies and be known as a great conqueror. And I am Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love. My epithets would already guarantee me the title of the most beautiful of them all. Choose me, and I will give you the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Aphrodite showed him the image of the beautiful Princess Helen of Sparta. Paris's heart was won by the desire to have that woman so beautiful that she could only be compared to the goddess of beauty herself. Thus the young Paris handed the golden apple to Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, celebrated her victory, but resentment remained in the hearts of the two unsuccessful goddesses. The goddesses Athena and Hera vowed to take revenge on the Trojan prince, and the people of Troy would pay a great price for Paris's choice. The city of Sparta was celebrating the return of the princess Helen, who had been kidnapped by the hero Theus but had been rescued by her twin brothers Caesar and Pollock. Helen was looking for a suitor, and because of her beauty she was the most desired princess in Greece. Knowing that the beautiful Helen had reached the age to marry, all the suitors went to Sparta. Her father, King Tendus of Sparta, did not know which husband to choose for his daughter, for any choice might offend the others. He was at a crossroads among the nobles. Was Otis, the king of the island of Itha, known for his cunning and sagacious mind. Although he was the son of Lear's, one of the Argonauts, some said that he was actually the son of Copus, the man so clever that he tricked the gods and even death. Music. In love with Penelope, she was not as beautiful as Helen, but she was much more intelligent. The shrewd nobleman approached the king and made him a proposal. He asked the monarch to use his influence over his brother Aereas to convince him to give Penelope's hand in marriage. By doing this, he would help the king resolve that difficult situation. Tereus, aware of Odysseus's famous shrewdness, readily accepted the proposal, and Otis told him what the monarch would have to do. After listening to Otis' plan, Helen's father spoke to the suitors with all solemnity. The king said that he would not interfere with the will of the gods. Therefore he would let Princess Helen choose her husband. The suitors cheered up. Those who thought they had little chance of being chosen by the king realized that there was a new window of opportunity, but the king demanded that everyone would have to swear to accept Helen's decision, and they would defend the sacredness of that marriage even if it led to war. All the suitors accepted the Spartan king's proposal and took the oath, sealed with the sacrifice of a horse. Helen was allowed to choose her husband. She carefully evaluated everyone among them, the bravest warriors, kings, and nobles of Greece. The only man unavailable was Agamemnon, the powerful king of Mayon, married to Clytemnestra, her sister, until she saw Prince Manlius so handsome that her knees trembled. Everything happened as Odysseus. Ithaca was sure that Helen would choose Menelaus because he was undoubtedly the most attractive, and Odysseus youthful, naive, which would cause her to choose the most handsome man. But the cunning king of Ith had a much more strategic vision in allowing Helen to choose her husband. Menelaus was not just any nobleman, he was the brother of Agamemnon, the most powerful king in all Greece. In this way the other suitors would never attempt to enter a contest for Helen for fear of the wrath of Menelaus and his powerful brother, just as he promised Aereas. Penelope's father gave his daughter to the hero. Thus Odysseus conquered one of Greece's most precious treasures. Helen and Menelaus married, and with the death of Tereus the couple inherited the throne of Sparta. For several years the couple lived in relative harmony, and Princess Hermione was born of this union. But the kingdom of Sparta would be shaken by a music storm. King Priam of Troy had more than 50 children. Among them were the twins Cassandra and Helenus. Early in their infancy their father decided that they would be given to serve in the temple of Apollo. One day when they were still children they both played in Apollo's temple and forgot the time to return home. As it was already late, they decided to sleep in the temple. During the night a serpent sent by Apollo licked the youngsters' ears, and thus they received the gift of prophecy. Young Cassandra grew up to be a beautiful woman who marveled the god Apollo. The god declared his love for the young girl, but she rejected him. Apollo managed to hide his anger at her rejection and asked her for only one kiss. When the young woman brought her lips close to the god, he spat in her mouth and cursed her. Cassandra still had the power of prophecy but had lost the power of persuasion. In this way no one ever believed in her prophecies again. Cassandra came to be seen and treated as crazy. If poor Cassandra had not rejected the god Apollo, the great bloodbath that was coming could have been avoided. In Troy preparations were being made for the annual festival in honor of Prince Alexander of Troy, who everyone believed had died. The soldiers of the royalty went to Mount Ida in search of prizes for the winners of the festival games. The guards chose the shepherd Paris's favorite bull as a tribute for the games, but he was unwilling to lose the animal he held so dear, so he went to Troy to participate in the tournament, and tried to get his bull back. The nymph who lived with Paris as if she were his wife prophesied if he left for Troy he would never have her in his arms again, as he would cross the sea and find another woman who would win his heart, and when he finally decided to seek Owen again it would be too late. The young shepherd had never been to a city like Troy and was amazed at its splendor and grandeur. He signed up for the games, where he would fight against the best warriors of Troy. Among them were some of King Priam's sons, including Hector the Crown Prince. The daring shepherd beat each of his opponents in the tournament, including some of King Priam's sons. Paris made it to the final of the tournament, where he would face Hector, the bravest Trojan warrior. The fight between the lost son of Priam and his heir and champion of Troy was close, but unbelievably Paris defeated the mighty Hector. Phobos, also King Priam's son, was furious to see a shepherd humiliate the royal house of Troy. He and his followers took up their weapons and attacked Paris. The shepherd fled and found shelter in Zeus's temple. Cassandra, the discredited prophetess who had already recognized her brother and knew that he would lead Troy to ruin, cried out for them to kill Paris, but instead of listening to Cassandra's cries, King Priam and Queen Hecuba asked the pursuers of Paris to stay away. The queen approached Paris and through tears recognized that this was her son whom she thought was dead. Achilles, the foster father of Paris, confessed that he didn't dare to kill the prince when he was just a baby, and that the Morai would have chosen a different fate for him. Achilles showed the rattle made by Hecuba for her baby, and all doubts about the prince's identity were dispelled. The parents of Paris in tears embraced their reborn son, and everyone celebrated the return of the Trojan music prince. It had been 10 years since Paris had regained his position as Prince of Troy. Suddenly an entourage from Sparta docked at a location near Troy. Minos, the king of Sparta, was leading the Greek entourage, which asked permission to take the remains of Greek warriors who were still there from the conflict between the Ons and the Trojans. Paris was responsible for hospitality, receiving the visitors. According to Trojan tradition, the Greeks were very pleased with the welcome. Before leaving, Minos stated that he wanted to pay the prince's hospitality and invited him to visit Sparta. Priam, the king of Troy, was missing his sister Hesione, who had been kidnapped by the Greeks when Hercules attacked Troy. The king decided to organize a squadron that would leave for Greece to recover the king's sister, who was at Salamis. The monarch allowed all necessary means to be used to accomplish his mission. The command of the expedition was given to Prince Paris, who would have the help of Aunus, Prince of Dardanus. With the help of the goddess Aphrodite, the winds drove the Trojan ships toward the Spartan coast. Paris took advantage of the invitation extended by Menus to improve his relationship with Sparta and re-establish his forces before setting sail for Salamis, where the sister of the king of Troy was. King Minos was very pleased and welcomed the Trojans, wanting to show the best of Greek hospitality. Minos was very proud of his beautiful wife, and so he ordered her to wear her most beautiful attire to be presented before the Trojan entourage. Paris was amazed to find the beautiful Queen Helen. She could only be the woman who Aphrodite had promised her love. The naive queen did not know that Os was spying on her with his bow at the behest of Aphrodite. Helen was also surprised by the charm and beauty of the prince from Asia. He was more handsome than all the Greeks she had ever seen. Minos was perhaps the most handsome of the Greek kings, but his beauty was eclipsed by Paris, who had an almost divine pulchritude. The queen's heart was pierced by one of Aros's arrows, and Helen suddenly fell in love with the Trojan prince. The following days were marked by feasts and banquets promoted by the king of Sparta in honor of his noble Trojan guests. Far from the king's eyes, a flame warmed the hearts of the Trojan prince and the queen of music, Sparta. But as if fate was written, a piece of news from the island of Syari aided the fulfillment of Aphrodite's promise. Cryas, Menelaus's grandfather and king of Syari, had died, so Minos left to be present at the funeral in Crete, but he left his guest in the care of the queen, who would reign in his place. As soon as the king of Sparta left Paris and Helen materialized all the repressed passion, the adulterous couple was consumed by a passionate madness. The Prince of Troy and the Queen of Sparta decided to flee together to Troy. Paris would still commit one last sin against Menelaus's hospitality. He gathered his men to rob the treasury of Sparta. The palace's small defensive line was surprised and could do nothing to protect their king's treasures. The population of Sparta revolted against the Trojans and tried to prevent the escape of Paris, who was attempting to kidnap their queen. They hurled stones and arrows, but protected by the Trojan guard, the couple managed to embark safely. The Trojan squadron left Sparta behind, carrying on its deck a great treasure in gold, silver, and jewels. The couple of lovers seemed satisfied and believed to be on their way to happiness, but the trail left by the lovers was followed by Ares, the god of war, and his sinister retinue. Paris and Helen would bring war, death, and despair to Troy. Helen's abduction would be the trigger for the beginning of a conflict that would be sung about for millennia to come. The War of Troy was beginning. Queen Helen of Sparta and the Trojan prince Paris docked on the island of Ai near the coast of Pelon. They were drunk with passion and stilled by arrows and wished to materialize that feeling. Paris and Helen had their first night of love on the beaches of Kai. Meanwhile, the other Trojans were having fun with the treasures stolen from Minos, but the news quickly reached Cre, where Menus and his brother Agamemnon were still mourning the body of their grandfather. Minos felt an enormous fury and thirst for revenge. Agamemnon tried to calm his brother and assured him that he would do everything possible to enforce the oath that the Greek nobles took when Helen chose Minos as her husband in the glorious city of Mayan, Greece. Dozens of warlords entered through the legendary Lion Gate and made themselves available to fulfill the oath before Agamemnon and Menus. They made their warriors available. These nobles had various motives. Some were motivated by honor, others to profit from the plunder of the rich city of Troy, and others above all desired glory. A gigantic army was formed with the goal of rescuing the Spartan queen. But the wise Nestor was an old king who had already participated in the most varied missions. He knew that they couldn't leave for Troy without recruiting the cunning king. Odessa, the small island of Ithaca, was not very wealthy and its few soldiers were not renowned, but its king was known to be clever, an attribute that could make a huge difference during the Greek campaign against Troy. Odysseus led a full life with his beautiful wife Penelope, with whom he had a son named Tellus. When Odysseus to fight Troy, he knew that someone would soon summon him. The king of Ithaca had no desire to leave his kingdom and family to take part in an uncertain adventure, so he decided to visit the oracle. If he were told that the war would be short and that he would return safe and sound, he would participate in the mission, but if the prophecy said otherwise, Odysseus, the old soothsayer, prophesied if music, Odysseus decided to do everything possible to prevent his going to Troy. Odysseus had gone crazy. Spread throughout Hos, the news reached the kings who were gathered around Agamemnon, saddening them. But Palamedes, the king of Euboea, who was almost as intelligent as Odysseus, Palamedes, Melanus, and Agamemnon left for Ithaca to check on Odysseus' situation. They were greeted upon arrival by the beautiful Penelope with her son Tellus on her lap. She seemed saddened by her husband's situation. Odysseus worked the land with a plow pulled by an ox and a donkey, an unusual combination. In addition, he sowed the land with salt. Minos and Agamemnon found that Odysseus, despite that grotesque scene, was not convinced. He took the hero's son from his mother's arms and placed him in front of the path. Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, stopped the animals abruptly so as not to run over his son, proving that his madness was just a trick. Odysseus furiously at Palamedes as he returned his son to his mother's arms. Music, Odysseus, with unparalleled courage, together with the two sons of Atreus, Odysseus left for war, leaving behind his beloved wife and little son. Odysseus, for having unmasked him as soon as there was an opportunity, he would take revenge on the king of Euboea for putting his son at risk and driving the patriarch away from his family. Meanwhile, Odysseus of Ps's famous son named Achilles had barely come of age. However, despite his youth, he was already recognized as the best Greek warrior. Achilles was the son of King Pus of Thessaly, with Thetis, a sea deity. There was a myth that claimed his invulnerability. When he was a baby, his mother immersed him in the sacred river Styx. Due to this ritual, he would be Protected by the gods, his only weak point was his heel, which did not touch the water of the sacred river. Achilles grew up, and together with his faithful friend Patrus was trained by the centaur Chiron, the renowned trainer of heroes, to become the greatest warrior of his time. Greek preparation for war was advanced, but King Agamemnon knew that the Hellenes would not leave for Troy without their greatest hero. The Diverculus had predicted that without Achilles among the Ons, victory in Troy would be impossible. Odysseus, learning of this prophecy, set out in search of Achilles. The hero of Ithaca strongly desired the success of this expedition so that he could return safe and sound to his land, where he would meet again his beloved Penelope, and his son Teleristus knew about the prophecy, which claimed that if her son fought at Troy he would never return alive, and, making use of matriarchal power, she ordered Achilles to hide in the court of King Lomes. There he would dress as a woman and mingle among the countless daughters of the king. Receiving the name of Pyra, in this court also lived the Princess Demia, Achilles' girlfriend, with whom he already had a 4-year-old son. His name was Neus, nicknamed Pius, following some clues. Odysseus, who received him with every hospitality, and introduced him to his many daughters. Among them was Achilles in disguise. The king of Ithaca had with him gifts for Ames's daughters. On a table he placed jewelry, Egyptian nakap, perfumes, mirrors, silk, and a sword. The girls